Hi guys, a very warm welcome to the channel. My name is Niels van Roij and today I will talk you through the design methodology of Silver Spectre Shooting Brake. So before any car designer starts with any project, it is important to know not just what you're going to do, what the briefing is, but where you came from. What is the brand DNA, let's say? Why are we making cars? Whether you're doing this for Kia, for Volkswagen, for Bentley, Audi, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, cars are not designed in a vacuum. There is a reason why a specific manufacturer decided to make cars the way they have done so in the past. And as a car designer, and obviously the whole team surrounding the car designer at the OEM, at the car manufacturer, it is your task to react to what happened in the past, to react to what's happening currently, and to create something that is relevant for that future. So, when it comes to Silver Spectre Shooting Brake, there is obviously a very rich heritage of English, British shooting brakes. And specifically the brand that our base car is, Rolls-Royce. There is, as you can see, a beautiful heritage, a beautiful history of these cars being coach-built. It started in the 20s, the 30s, even the 40s. They still built these handmade cars entirely designed around the wishes and the ideas of the patron. So what I started with was just to have a look at a history. What is that brand? How have people made these cars their own? Here an American car, and you can see it's very different from the European iterations, the European coach builds. Also, let us know in the comments what you think of the cars that are coming by in the screen now. I think there are some very special, not always very successful, like the car on this image. It's not necessarily a pretty car, it's almost like a bus, it's very slab-sided, it's very high obviously, but there is some interesting work going on around, let's call it D-pillar. You can see the roof is almost like, like a chocolate sauce on a cake. It's sort of running over the edges and you can see the woodwork is following it. It's not necessarily a pretty car, but it is interesting, and I think it's important to, especially this early in the creative process, to not judge as in good or bad design, but to take it all in, to really gather all this information and to see what people did based on these motor cars. This is a car that is obviously made a lot later in the 60s compared to around the 30s with regards to the woodies, the wooden shooting brakes. And and I also like to see them dirty. I like to see different iterations again based on that design by different coach builders. And slowly but surely there is this feeling developing of indeed some better iterations and maybe some iterations that weren't so successful. But again, I try to not judge too quickly or too early on in the process. I really try to take on and see, what did they do? What kind of questions did they maybe ask themselves? So it's a very eclectic group of images that I just have a look at. And let me stop it right here, because this was actually a very key image for me. This rear three-quarter view showcasing that very heavy C-pillar. It's very sculptural. The rear window is pushed backwards. The shut line of the boot and the shape of the boot I think is very elegant. So this was sort of a key image to me. And for that reason, let's quickly take it into Photoshop and let me point out a few things that I felt were interesting to take forward. And this is an exercise I'm now going to show you with only one car or one image, but this is an exercise I've done with many of these images, to just to sketch over them, to get a feel of the proportions, the surfacing, the jewelry, the graphics, so the outlines of the windows, the tail lights, the chrome elements, how everything is just tied together. Just to get a feeling, not with any intent yet to actually design a car like this, but just to get a feeling of what the boys and girls did in the 50s or the 60s in this case, working on this car. So here we have this image of the Silver Cloud 2 on the screen in Photoshop, and like I said, just let me zoom in on a few key features that I really felt were rather interesting. Like I said, this very heavy C-pillar, and not just the fact that it is heavy, because it's there for a very important reason. Those who travel in the back of a Rolls-Royce, and they're sitting basically next to that heavy C-pillar. Well, what does that C-pillar do? It doesn't just look, very strong and safe from the outside. It actually allows the passengers to sit behind it, if you like. So those who are looking in from the outside are not really able to see who is in the back of this Rolls-Royce, and those who are sitting inside can just peek right outside next to that pillar. So you feel sort of cocooned, if you like. You feel safe. Nobody can shoot images right in your face because you're behind that pillar, but you're still very able to look out and sit comfortably. So it's a very important part of the brand DNA, and I felt, even though we're making a shooting brake, which obviously is not just a car you're sitting in the back, but it's also a car you would like to drive, but this is such an, let's say, intrinsic part of the Rolls-Royce brand DNA, of British car DNA. Classic Daimlers had it, classic Bentleys. This heavy C-pillar was something very important that I wanted to take forward. And it's not just the pillar and the fact that it's there, but it's the way it's been done. Let me show you a different iteration on a very similar chassis, where the pillar, as you can see, is a lot thinner. There's a window basically that you could say allows you as a passenger to even look outside of the car a bit better, a bit easier, because it's like next to you. The glass is next to you rather than the C-pillar being next to you. But I think the roof as a whole looks way more tacked on. It's not as, it doesn't sit in the bodywork as nicely. There's a relatively hard line here, and the amount of flesh here is relatively thin if you compare that to the underbody of the car. So to me, this cloud solution, where it's not just that heavy C-pillar, but also the material surrounding the rear window that is very different. It combines to, in a way, an even heavier C-pillar, an even more three-dimensional C-pillar, with some lovely, very soft surfacing. So what they did, let me just put that line here. What you see is there's this little edge here. Modern car design, you will see the windows are up until, let's say, the edges of the boot, the edges of the car, and they're glued in, meaning the window is flush with the surface of the car, and it's joined to another direction, if you like, of the surface of the bodywork. Here, the surface of the bodywork is flush with the window, and then it angles towards the boot. And I think that was one of the moments where I was like, well, this is really interesting. This is a very classical, very British way of designing a car. This window is deeper, is pushed deeply into the bodywork. It shows, in a way, a sense of quality. To me, at least, it's a certain thickness, if you like, a volume. And this was just the way they used to build cars back in the day. So also a lot of regular cars had these windows basically put in from the rear, from the interior, rather than from the exterior, as is the case with current car production. So that surface treatment around the window I thought was very interesting. Here again, this line in the roof, again creating this surface that is surrounding the window being a bit more narrow and a bit less high, so it's a bit more shallow, if you like. This sort of envelope window, which again gives a sense of cocooning, a sense of protection, sitting in the back of the car. You feel that not everybody can see the back of your head, and the amount of light is a bit less coming in from the back, so it's all a bit softer. So I felt that was a very interesting way of looking at that rear end of the car. And then there is this very simple, maybe simple is not the right word, because it's very well placed, this shut line for the boot. It's just one very simple line running over, but it's slightly dynamic. It's pushed forwards, let's say, so towards that direction, and it's really emphasizing the softness of the surface of the boot area, the boot lid, and it gives again this extra piece of surface there towards that edge of the bodywork that is running underneath the window. So this really, like I said, was a key image for me to take forward into the creative process, and I'll share that as well. I'll share the early ideation sketches in one of our upcoming videos on this car. But for now, let's move back into this big group of images that I had a look at. So that Silver Cloud 2, like I said, very important car for the creative process. And obviously, I had a look at way more Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, Minis, Aston Martins, like a wide range of British design to try to understand what British car design is. What does define British car design? What are certain common features that one might see in a Range Rover, in a Bentley, in a Rolls-Royce? One of them is the way, as you can see on this image, of the Phantom 7. Outer edges, I have to say, of the fenders are a bit higher compared to the inner edges of the fenders, and then the bonnet comes up. So you've got these two sort of guidelines if you're sitting inside of the car that just pinpoint for you where the car stops. And it has this very regal appearance, I think, too, very architectural, very interesting surface treatment on British cars. So obviously this is the front end, and we didn't do anything with the front end of Silver Spectre Shooting Brake, that's entirely OEM, but nevertheless interesting cues to learn and see how these cars were designed and what's important. Phantom 7, the car I just referred to, very heavy C-pillar again, reminding you of the story, but also have a look at that rear window, how that's flush. I think a marvelous piece of automotive design. I think the 7 is just truly fantastic. I think it's better, quite a bit better than Phantom 8. But this is not a design review on Rolls-Royces or the Phantom. It's looking at images of British cars, and again comparing what the brand did, not just Rolls-Royce, but also, like I said, Bentley or Mini, and many other brands that I had a look at to understand the design better. So back again to the Cloud and a beautiful side view. Great to see that heavy C-pillar, the shoulder line, the hips, how the boot area is placed on top of the rear fenders, that lovely shut line that runs into the same direction as that C-pillar. So all very properly done, very well done, well executed. The car sits on its rear wheels very nicely. It's a great sculpture, very pleasant to look at indeed. Moving forward to the 70s and the 80s, where you see still that heavy pillar, that heavy C-pillar, but in a very different interpretation. Some interesting surfacing, beautiful photo here as well. Research. I've got a lot of books, photo books. I obviously browse the internet, YouTube, auction websites. Just there's a lot of visual information to be found. And let me just quickly stop at this shooting brake as well, because there's this very interesting D-pillar here in this case. So again, the last pillar of the vehicle, the rear window. Of course, these woodies are a bit stiff. That's just the way they were constructed. That's, they're from the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. That was just the way car design was back in the days. But I can see the intent there, and the softness that's in that line. Not necessarily this specific car and this specific softness, but the softness in that line, that window line, that's also carried forward in Silver Spectre. So rather than having what the OEM is currently offering, so what Rolls-Royce is currently doing, this hard edge C-pillar, where the window is just on the shoulder and it stops. In case of Silver Spectre, it runs from the A-pillar over the roof towards the C-pillar and then back to the front again. So it's a different graphic, a different way of showing the brand DNA, let's say, and that's really coming from the research, coming from all these classic cars from the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. So I hope you enjoyed this little peek inside of the research into Silver Spectre Shooting Brake. In the next video, we'll take this into the very first ideation sketches, so the first time pen and paper are used, a simple big pen and a simple white piece of paper to translate these first wild ideas into a tangible sketch, which in the end will be developed into an actual motor car. For now, I'd like to thank you very much for watching this video. Please do like the video, let us know in the comments what you think of the video, of this methodology of the classic cars you've seen. Please follow the channel too, and again, let us know in the comments what you think of the methodology and of course of Silver Spectre Shooting Brake. Thank you and see you next time. Cheers.